Begin today the Gemara on Daf Lamed Hey, 10 lines down from the top of the Yamud. Gemara goes back to what it said in the Mishnah, where there was a discussion between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shua. Why did Chachamim make a decree that the cheese of Goyim is Asr? And he tried to explain it to him different ways, and he didn't accept any of his explanations. So in the end, the Mishnah says, as the Gemara quotes, Rabbi Shua changed the topic of the conversation, and he asked him a question on how you pronounce a word in Shir HaShirim. When it says, Ki toivim doidecha miyayin, do you pronounce it toivim doidecha, which is Lashon Zachar? That means that the Yidden are talking to the Eibishter, the Yidden are the Isha, and they're talking to the Eibishter, which is the Ish, that your beloved is better than wine? Or do you read it doidayich, doidayich Lashon Nekeva, that the Eibishter is speaking about the Yidden's beloved? And he got it wrong. He said that you read it doidayich, and Rabbi Shua told him, no, you read it doidecha. That was the conclusion of the Mishnah. Okay, so the Gemara says, so what does it mean? My kitoivim doidecha miyayin. This mashal and Shir HaShirim that we say to the Eibishter that your beloved is better than good wine. Who is that? So Kiyasar Avdimi, Omar Avdimi came and explained that Omra Knesset Yisrael Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He didn't say to the Eibishter, Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the universe, Arevim Olai Divrei Deidecha. It's more sweeter to me and better to me the words of your beloved, which refers to the Chachamim that make all kinds of gzeiros and are the ones that are machadish and teire, yeser miyena shel teire, more than the wine of teire, which Rashi says refers to the ikar of teire, which is teire shebechsav. This is the famous Gemara that says that Arev Malai Divrei Seifrim, this concept that the words of the Chachamim are better and sweeter, even more than teire shebechsav, even than the yena shel teire. And the reason for this is because the Chachamim are the ones that have the koyach to create fences for Torah and are machadish more in Torah, and therefore that expresses the tremendous koyach that the Chachamim have, or it shows the power of the Chachamim, the power of a Yid, that's even more than, even higher than the Indian of Torah, as it's explained in Chassidus, the Indian Barichas. The Mashal says that, according to this Pshat the Gemara is saying here, you understand why Rabbi Shua, when it says that he changed the topic of the conversation, he brought this pasuk. Because after Rabbi Shmuel showed Rabbi Shua that it seems like the gzeira of the Chachamim to ask the cheese doesn't have a good reason, so he brings him this pasuk of Shir HaShirim to tell him whether you understand the reason of not, by the Eibishter, the gzeiros of the Chachamim is more beloved even than Torah shebiksav. So you have to accept the gzeiros of the Chachamim, and regarding this as well, regarding the issur of not eating their cheese. But here the Gemara though continues and says that he also hinted him something else by bringing him this pasuk. He didn't say it clearly to him, but the Gemara says, "Maishna haikra de shayle." Why did Rabbi Shua ask Rabbi Shmuel, how do you read this pasuk here in Shir HaShirim? The reason why I asked him this pasuk is because he was hinting him Mireisha de Kra Kamaleh. He was telling him, look at what it says in the beginning of the pasuk. Yishakeni minashikes pi, or he kisses me with a kiss from his mouth. Amalei, Rabbi Shua was saying to him, Yishma Alachi, Yishma my brother, Chashaik Sveisecha Zu Bezu, purse your lips closed like when a person kisses, Va'al Teva Lahoshev, and don't be so quick to answer. When I'm trying to explain to you what this Gzeira is about, and you have an answer for everything, it could be a good answer, but hold your lips closed and don't answer except the Gzeira of Chachamim. Okay, so now here, after this, the Gemara will bring here from Amirayim that explains, so what is Taka, the reason why the Gvina of Goyim, the cheese from the Goyim, is Aser? The Mishnah, the explanation was it seems like it was not adequate. So what is the reason? So the Gemara, so my time, what's the reason for the Isser of the cheese? Amar Ula, V'taimer of Shmuel Barabe, Gzeira Chadoshihi. Oh, sorry. Here first the Gemara explains what's the reason why he's telling him, keep your lips closed and don't ask any question about this. The reason is because this was a Gzeira Chadosha. At that time it was a new decree of Chachamim. When it's a new Gzeira, we don't want to come and explain the reason for this Gzeira. As she says, the word mefakbika means like to look, to try to pick into it and to look for the reason. We don't want to look into it, and the reason is because then people are going to come to say, "Oh, this is the reason." I don't accept this reason. So the Gemara explains my gzeirta. So what is take the reason for this? What's the reason for the gzeira? The reason is mishum nikkur. They were geyser because a snake could go into this cheese by a goyim that are not careful to cover it and put its venom into the cheese, and therefore we can't eat from it. Like we had this in the Sugya in the Gemara before, the things that are exposed, we're afraid of the venom of a snake. That was the reason for the Gzeira with the cheese. So the Gemara says, so if that's the reason, it's a pretty simple reason. We find already a Mishnah and other places where it speaks about wine or water or milk that's left overnight that's also for this reason. So why didn't Rabbi Shua simply tell Rabbi Shmuel this reason? So he should have just simply told him this reason. He's giving him all kinds of other reasons. And it says the Gemara Kedola. The reason is like Ola said, the Ama Ola Kigazi Gzerte b'Marave in Eretz Yisrael in the West when they made a Gzeira, they didn't reveal the true reason for the Gzeira for 12 months because there's a person who's going to say that this reason that Chachamim are coming up with for this Gzeira, for me it's not a concern, I'll be careful, it doesn't apply to me. And he'll come to be Mizalzel, he won't take serious the Gzeira of the Chachamim. And so therefore, Rabbi Shua was avoiding telling Rabbi Shmuel the real reason that the Chachamim made for this Gzeira. Okay, this was the reason that Rabbi Shua ben Levi said for the whole Gzeira. Now, it says the Gemara, Megadev bar Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah was Megadev. Megadev literally means to curse, but it means he made a sign with his hands, like to dismiss this reason. He says, this can't be the reason. Because Ela Meyata, if so, this Gzeira on the cheese from Goyim should be much more limited. Yavsha, if you see the cheese is hard cheese, it dried up, tishtiri, you should be allowed to eat from it. Or Yashan, if it's cheese, aged cheese, that it's good, hard, old cheese, should also be allowed. Why? Because Rab Chanina said, Yavish mutter, that if it's dry, this is when you have something that there's a concern that the snake put its venom inside, if it dries up, then it's allowed. Because once there's the venom of the snake, it doesn't allow it to harden and to dry up this way, that venom of the snake. And Yashan, if it also becomes old, it ages and it doesn't go sour, it's also going to be mutter. Why? Because if there's the venom of the snake inside, it won't allow it to age and remain good. It's going to spoil. So if so, old hard cheese should be mutter according to this Gzeira. So therefore, the Gemara brings another reason here. Amar Rab Chanina says, or it's another gersa in the Gemara that it's Rabbi Yirmiyah, he's the one that asked this question. He said that the reason why they made the Gzeira on the cheese, because it's impossible that there isn't any leftovers from the milk that there is inside the cheese, and therefore this milk that could be inside this cheese could be from milk from a guy that's tamei milk, from non-kosher milk. Okay, so what the Gemara is saying over here is that this is something that says the Gemara many times, that when it comes to milk that comes from a kosher animal, that milk will curdle, will harden, will become cheese. But the milk from a non-kosher animal does not harden, does not become cheese. So if you have cheese, so you know that it comes from a kosher animal. But nevertheless, even when you have cheese, there's still some tzich echolov, there's still from the whey of the milk that's left between the cheese that doesn't harden completely. And therefore, that could be from a kosher behemoth, or that can be actually from that liquid that didn't harden, that comes from a non-kosher animal. So therefore, if the guy is producing this cheese, there could be some leftovers of this non-kosher milk that's inside the cheese that never hardened. That's another reason. Shmuel says a third reason. How do they produce the cheese, the guy? They use the actual oir, the actual skin, or even from the actual flesh of the stomach of the animal to the enzymes of this is placed into the milk, and it's what will harden the cheese. Okay, now this is different from what the Gemara spoke about before. The Gemara before mentioned that what they would do is they would take from what's called rennet, which is from the leftover hard milk that's inside the stomach of the animal, and that they would put into the milk, and it has an enzyme that would curdle the milk, it will make it hard. But over here, Shmuel says, no, sometimes they use the actual keva itself, from the flesh of the keva itself to harden the milk. If you use only the rennet, that's something the Gemara explained is not a problem, because it's not considered to be like part of the body of the animal b'chlal. It's called pirsha. It's not aser. But over here, if they're using from the keva itself, from the actual flesh of the animal itself, then that's a problem. Okay, so therefore, you can't use from the cheese of Gayim. They produce it through this. So the Gemara now is medayik here, and what Shmuel said, this reason, hakeva gufe sharia. Does that mean that Shmuel is saying that if you're using from the rennet of the stomach, of the non-kosher animal, that will be allowed? Is that Shmuel's opinion? And the Gemara actually said this before. that when you use the rennet, it's not a problem. But is this Shmuel's opinion? But did Shmuel say this? There's a Mishnah that says, when you use the rennet of the animal that a guy shechted, or v'shon nevela, or from a dead carcass, hareza asura, it's aser. So and the question was asked on this Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Chulin, so the question was asked on this. Otu the oivikachavim lav nevelihi. Why is the Mishnah dividing that there's two things? There's from a guy, or it's nevela. If the guy is shechted it, then it's nevela. It's not a good shechita. So for Amar Shmuel, and Shmuel explains chodekatani. The Mishnah really is not two separate cases. It means one thing. Kevas shchitas oivik kachavim nevela asura. The keva, which is the rennet that's in the stomach of the animal, of the milk that a guy shechted, which is an avela, will be aser. So over here, you see from that Mishnah in Chulin, and the way Shmuel explained it, that the rennet of the stomach of this animal of a guy is going to be aser. And over here, Shmuel seems to be saying, no, the rennet is not going to be aser. No, the keva, when it says here the lashon keva, it does not mean the actual part of the stomach itself, the meat or the skin or the flesh of the stomach itself. It means the rennet. That's what keva and the lashon of the Gemara means. He says only the oir of the keva is going to be aser. That refers only to the actual stomach itself. You take from the actual walls of the stomach itself. Okay, so the Gemara says that loy kashya, this contradiction in Shmuel's opinion is not a contradiction, or really the contradiction is not only mitzat Shmuel, but it's a contradiction really in the Mishnayos here, because this is a Mishnah in Chulin that says that there's a problem with the keva, with the rennet of the animal, and then in the Mishnah before, in the discussion between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Shmuel proves to Rabbi Shmuel that the rennet is mutter. So what's the answer to this? That is kan kaidem chazara and kan lacha chazara. In the discussion between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shua, so Rabbi Shua retracted his opinion. Rabbi Shua in the Mishnah l'chatchila said that the reason to asa the cheese of goyim is because they use this rennet. And then Rabbi Shmuel proved to him that that's not true. The rennet is not part of the body of the animal. It's just being stored inside the body, and it's not aser. So the Mishnah in Chulin there is stating that the rennet itself is aser. This is before Rabbi Shua retracted from his opinion. But after he retracted his opinion, Rabbi Shmuel proved him that it's not true. So then it changes. No Mishnah lezazam emkaima, but the original understanding that Rabbi Shua had, that didn't change, it remains, and therefore in the Mishnah in Chulin, it's taught that the keva itself, the rennet, is going to be aser. The Gemara now brings a fourth reason why the cheese of a guy should be aser. Rav Malkia, Mishmei, the Rav Ada bar Ava Amad, that the reason is mipnei shemachlikim paneo b'shum chazer. When the guy produced his cheese, they coat it with the fats of a swine, which is called lard. That's the problem. Another issue. Fifth reason the Gemara says, Rav Chisda Alma, the reason is because another way how to curdle the milk to produce the cheese is they would take from vinegar that has the wine from a guy in it, also has the enzyme that's able to make the cheese. So they're making it with yayin nesach. Our sixth reason the Gemara says, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, the reason is that sometimes they will produce the cheese by using the sap that comes from a tree, which is an arla tree, which is also aser bahana, and therefore the cheese of a guy is going to be aser. So it's interesting, after the Mishnah said that we don't have a clear reason why Chachamim aser the cheese, the Gemara here brings 6 different reasons why the cheese would be aser. And after all these reasons, it's interesting that there's a Taisus here, a long Taisus in Amar Aleph, where Taisus says that the Isser of not using the cheese of a guy today is not so clear. Why? Because from all these reasons, the reason that's accepted is the first reason, Rabbi Shua ben Levi's reason, we pascal like Rabbi Shua ben Levi, which is that there could be the venom of a snake inside of it, and that whole reason of the venom of a snake is B'chlal not so pashut if we accept it today when there's no snakes amongst us, and therefore Taisa says B'chlal it's not so pashut that the cheese should be aser, and there were certain areas that they B'harbe Mekaimis Taisa brings. They would eat from the cheese of goyim because they B'chlal didn't even use any of these different enzymes to produce the cheese. They would use Prachim, Taisa says, they use different herbs that grew for the cheese, and therefore Taisa says it's not so pashut about the isser of cheese. Okay, but B'payil, Taisa brings up that there's another problem that could be, again? Yeah, and a chanami. But Afal Pikein, Taisa says that this is a kind of gzeide Taisa says that even though they usually say that you can't be mevatel gzeira of Chazal, but kanira benigeh to this reason of the venom of the snake, you see that B'Pal today we're not nizer with this. And that's a reason that Taisa actually brings up that if you use the Oyer Keva, if you follow the reason of Shmuel, which the Rambam, that's actually the Rambam paskins like Shmuel, that the problem is that they would use from the actual stomach of the animal itself. That's the reason the Rambam brings. Taisa says that if it's being done and it's cold, then the issue will be just the fact that it's nevela. But if it's actually heated up, or if you put salt in it and it gets sort of sharp and pickled, then there could be another issue, which is basa b'chalav. That's what Taisus brings up over here. Okay, let's go back to the Gemara. The last reason the Gemara mentioned here is the fact that it's sraf for arla, that it would using the sap from the trees of arla. So the Gemara now says the sap of the tree, so in other words, it's not the fruits from the tree. So Kaman, according to whose opinion is this reason that Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak said, Kehai Tana. It's like the Tanya in this Braisa, the Tanya, or the Tanan is the Mishnah, it says that Rabbi Eliezer said that Hamayimid, Bisraf ha'arla, if you're making the cheese with the sap that comes from an arla tree, aser. It'll be aser mipnei shu peiri, because the sap of the arla tree is aser bahana, just like the peiris that grow on the tree first 3 years. But there's another opinion that Rabbi Shua there argues in the Mishnah and says that only the fruits of the arla tree are aser bahana, but not the sap. But the Gemara says I feel the time Rabbi Shua. What the reason of Rav Nachman Yitzchak is even according to Rabbi Shua's opinion. Because Atkan le'polig Rabbi Shua le Rabbi Eliezer ele bekatfa de guza. His argument is the sap that comes from the tree itself. So over there, it's a question if it's part of the Isser of Arla. Aval bekatfa de peire, but the sraf, the sap that comes from the fruit itself, mighty. Over there, they agree. And behind the Tanan, and this is what it says there in the Mishnah, Amar Rabbi Shua, that Rabbi Shua said, Shamaiti beferish, I heard explicitly, Shahamaymed b'sraf ha'alin u b'sraf ha'ikrin mutter. If you're using the sap that comes from the leaves of the tree or from the root of the tree, that's allowed. That's not included in the Isser. But b'sraf ha'pagin, if you're using the sap that comes from pagin, which is the fruits before they're ripe, and the sap that you can use from it, that's going to be awesome if they shu peri. That comes from the fruit of the tree itself. Therefore, the reason of Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak is according to all opinions. Okay, but now the Gemara concludes with a question on two of the reasons that were mentioned, the two last reasons to aser the cheese of a guy. Bein l'Rav Chisda, bein l'Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak. According to both of these reasons, titzar bahana. The cheese should also be aser bahana. The reason Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak, Rav Chisda said was that it's because they can use vinegar, which has yayin nesach in it, to make the cheese. The reason Rav Nachman Yitzchak said it's because they're using from Arla. Both of these things are Asa Bahana. So why is it only Asa Ba'achila, according to the opinion of Chachamim in the Mishnah? So the Gemara Taka says, Kasha. According to their opinion, that remains a question why it's only Asa Ba'achila and not Bahana. Okay, going back to the Pasuk that Rabbi Shua brought, Darash Rav Nachman Bereid Rav Chisda Ma'idach Siv. What's the meaning of the pasuk where it says in that pasuk in Shir Hashirim? So it goes on to say that l'reach shmanecha tovim, the aroma of your oil is very pleasant. So what is this referring to? So just like the pasuk of tovim deidecha miyayin, it goes in Talmidei Chachamim. This pasuk also goes in Talmidei Chachamim. Lema Talmid Chacham doime. What is a Talmid Chacham compared to? Litzleiches shel palyaitin, to a bowl of palyaitin, which is I think balsam. Yeah. So megula, when it's exposed. So then Recha Neidiv, then it has a very good aroma that everyone could smell. But Mechusa, if you cover it, Ein Recha Neidiv, then you don't smell it at all. So what this means is that a Talmid Chacham that's teaching Torah to his Talmidim, so then it has its effect, and the smell comes for all the Talmidim that learn Torah from him. Not only this, what's the mile of a Talmid Chacham that's teaching Torah? Elodvarim shemechusim imenu, the matters of Torah that were hidden from him, Mizgalamai, will be revealed to him. Shanama, because the pasuk in the end goes on to say, Alomas ahivucha, which literally means the maidens love you. So, but the Gemara Darshans, Kiribei alumais, that those hidden matters of Torah will be revealed to the Talmid Chacham that teaches Torah. And furthermore, this is Adal Rebbe brings also a similar to this Indian in Torah. The Rebbe used to always quote this, that by Talmid Chacham Meir Eine Shneim Avaya, that when one teaches Torah to someone else, then Nasa Meiche V'Libe Zakim Elaf Pam Kacha. That it refines a person's mind 100 times more to learn and understand Torah. Another thing, Even the Malach HaMavis loves him, meaning he won't do him any harm. Shanam, the pasuk says, Alamais ahivucha. What does Alamis here mean according to this pshat? Kiribe al maves. The one that's the Malach appointed for death will love the person. And even more so, Alamis will inherit two worlds, this world, and the world to come. Alamais kiribe oilamais. He inherits two worlds. Okay, Zok the Heilige Mishnah, continuing with halachis of the different things that are aser from a guy, and here the Mishnah speaks about the things that are aser ba'achila, and not ba'hanov. Ve'elu dvarim, the following are the things she'el oivdei kichavim, that come from the goyim, the idol worshippers, that are asurin, they are aser ve'ein isuran isser ana, but they're not aser to have any benefit, only a isser to eat from them. So what are they? Chalav shachavei kichavim, milk, a guy that milks the cow. And a yid does not observe this. You don't have a yid that sees the guy milking this cow. Is going to be aser ba'achila. And the Gemara will explain the reason for this. V'hapas, bread that was baked by a guy, is aser. And the reason for bread being aser is not because of any concern of anything being not kosher, but the reason is, and this is regarding other things as well, isser of chasnus. In order not to eat from a guy's bread, and that will come to join him in a party and be together with them, assimilate and intermarry with a guy. Chasnos. V'hashem and shalahem. And the oil that's produced by Goyim as well is asr. This was originally the gezeira of Chachamim, that a guy the oil of a guy is asr as well. But on this, the Mishnah says, Rebbe ubeis dinoi, Rebbe and his bezdin, hitiru Hashem. They were matter this isra that the Chachamim made on oil. Now Rashi here actually says that this line in the Mishnah, Rebbe ubeis dinoi, he should not be guided this in the Mishnah, because in the Gemara it says that it wasn't Rebbe that removed this gzeira, it was Rabbi Yehuda Nesiah, which was a grandson. He was, or great grandson. He was in the times, Yeah, he was grandson. He was in the times of Dameiraim. He's the one that removed this gzeira. And the Gemara will explain, how could you take away a gzeira that Chazal were already geyser? There will be a discussion in the Gemara. Okay, Hitir Hashem, they were matter the Shemen. What else did Chachamim aser? V'hashlokos, anything, this is the bishul akum, anything that a guy cooks, and a kvashin, not only cooked, but also things that are pickled, shadarkan, lases, l'seichan, yayin, v'chaimitz. When they pickle things, they place into it possibly this wine and vinegar. There could be an issue of yayin nesach. Okay, so there's also an interesting discussion in Rishayim about this, that once you're answering all the different things that goyim cook, so then why would there be a specific need to make a gzeira for pas, for bread? Isn't that included? So some Rishonim say that first they made the gzeira only on bread, then they added all other things that are cooked as well. Some say actually it was the opposite. First they made a gzeira on things that are cooked, and then they added bread. It could be also nafkaminas between them, but it was two separate gzeiras: bread, pasakum, and bishul akum. Okay, then there's another gzeiras, taris, trufa. Taris is a kind of small fish that's salted. Sounds like a herring, small salted fish. That's trufa, that's cut into small pieces. And because it's cut into small pieces, you can't see if it's kosher fish or not. That's the reason for this gzeira. And vitzir, and then the fish brine, she'emba doga kalbis. That you don't see this kalbis fish that's in this fish brine. What's this kalbis fish? So this is an interesting thing, that dafke in the fish brine of kosher fish, that's where this kalbis, which was actually not even a kosher fish, that's where this kalbis would be found. In the fish brine from non-kosher fish, this kalbis would not be found in it. So when you have this kalbis in it, so then you know that's a sign that it's actually a fish brine from a kosher fish. That's the pshat in here, the way Rashi explains it. There are actually some Rishonim that take out this thing of kalbis. They're not good as this whole thing. It's an interesting concept. Some are not good as this. Okay, now v'hachilik, the chilik fish. This we had mentioned already before in the Gemara, that this fish the Gemara refers to as the sultanis fish, which is a fish that when it's small, you don't see the snapper and kaskestes, you don't see the scales and fins in it, and therefore it's very easy to mix it with non-kosher fish. And only later, when it gets bigger, you can see what kind of fish this is. So when you have the chilik fish, so there it gets mixed with other non-kosher fish. And also the kairet shel chiltis, a piece that was cut with a knife a chiltis, which is a sharp herb. I don't know what the translation of chiltis is. They have a translation for chiltis there? Huh? Yeah, but they don't have a translation for the word chiltis. Okay, so because the guy cuts it with his knife, which could have been used for meat with fats of non-kosher meat, that he cuts this sharp herb with it, so therefore it's going to be aser. Umelach shal kundis, which will be explained in the Gemara exactly what the story with this salt is. Harei elu asurim. These are all the things that are asur ba'achila. Ve'eni surim misarana. It's not asur ba'hana. Okay, so the Gemara starts with the chalav akim, with milk. Chalav, says the Gemara regarding the milk, what is there a concern with this milk of a guy? If the concern is that the guy exchange the kosher milk with non-kosher milk from a non-kosher animal, but why would we be concerned? You can see the difference. The milk of a kosher animal has a wider look, and tameh yaruk, and from the non-kosher milk it's more yellowish. If the concern is that he'll mix in some of the non-kosher milk into the kosher milk. So says the Gemara, you can test it to see if it's non-kosher milk. Neikum, let's try to curdle this milk, which means to produce the cheese of it, and you'll see if the milk will hold. Will it become hard? Will it become cheese? Because the master said, Chalav ta'ir oimid, kosher milk, so that's something which will curdle, it'll become cheese. Chalav tamei, non-kosher milk, ein oimid, it doesn't become hard. So you can see if there's any non-kosher milk mixed into this. So it's actually pointed out that the Gemara always says this, that non-kosher milk, you can't, it doesn't harden, that this was in the Zman of the Gemara, when the enzymes that they used was only effective regarding kosher milk, not for non-kosher milk. But today, they have ways how to produce cheese, even out of non-kosher milk as well. And the Dama says, I think it says that even in the time of the Gemara, the non-kosher milk would also curdle to some extent, but not as much as the kosher milk. Okay, so the Gemara is asking that you can test it to see if it'll harden or not. So the Gemara says, well, if he's going to use this milk for cheese, then you're right, he'll produce the cheese and he'll see right away if it's kosher milk or not. Over here, we're talking about a person, the kimcha. He's not using it for cheese. He's using it to produce kimcha, which is kimcha is a kind of food. The Gemara usually calls it. I think this is the same as the kutach habavli that they make with stale bread and different ingredients that they put the milk inside. So he's not using it for cheese. Okay, but even if he's not using it for cheese, but v'nishkol mina kali. So take a little bit of the milk and v'neikem and try to see if it'll be hardened, if it'll become cheese. So the Gemara answers, Kivin de betoy, no, because even when you have kosher milk and you're making cheese out of it, Ikin is yoivi doloi kaimi. There is still from the water of the milk, which is what's called whey. There's always, when the milk becomes cheese, it separates the hard part of the milk that curdles, it becomes cheese, and then there's the whey that remains there, doloi kaimi, that does not curdle. So lekala make him a lot of milsa. You're not going to be able to tell, because there's always going to be some liquid left over, so you're going to try to do this with this milk, and there can be non-kosher milk mixed inside, and you're going to see some liquid there. You're not going to know if it's the whey from the kosher milk or from the not kosher milk. Or others say, and here as you see, some take out over here the v'iba yisayim in the Gemara. Most Rishonim don't have it because the continuation of the Gemara seems to follow with the same logic. That going back to the point that we said before, even if he's going to use this milk to produce cheese from it, you're not going to be able to see if there's non-kosher milk mixed inside, because between the cracks inside the cheese, there's going to be some liquid there, and you're not going to know what this liquid is. Is it from kosher milk, the whey from the kosher milk, or is it from the non-kosher milk that's inside this cheese? So the kitzur, this is the Gemara here, that cholav akim is aser because of the concern that the guy may mix into it non-kosher milk. Okay, and the Mishnah says that the only hatter for this is Yisrael Rayeyu, that a Yid sees this. There's a famous pshat that it says, Cholav shechol v'akim ve'in Yisrael Rayeyu. I think it's a story with by Rab Nachman Chernobyl. I don't know if it's exactly benegay to Cholav, but that Cholav shechol v'akim, that if it's milk that a guy milked it, then ein Yisrael Rayeyu. A Yid doesn't even see this milk. A tzaddik, he won't see milk. Meaning he won't be able to eat from it. And the story about Rab Nachman Chernobyl was regarding milk or regarding something else. I think a story that's brought there regarding this is also that once by a mimer, by the Rebbe Rashab, there were people in another room near him that were making noise, and he didn't. So in order for it not to disturb him, he lost his chush hashmiyah on that ear, because a tzaddik, when he's learning Torah, he doesn't want to hear anything else, so he doesn't hear. Say Ein Yisrael Re'eyu, something that's not kosher, a Yid just doesn't see it. If he's on this level, Yisrael. Okay, now going to the bread, pasakum. Fahapas. So the Mishnah said that it's aser. What's the reason? So, the reason actually is, as I mentioned before, chasnos. But here the Gemara will explain regarding this gzeira of the bread. Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav Yechanan, pas loy hutra bebezin. So Rav Yechanan said that this iser, this gzeira of the bread from goyim, they never changed this gzeira. They never made it mutter. Says the Gemara. Now the fact that Rav Yechanan has to clarify this, miklal the ikeman the shari. That means that there is somebody that understood that there was a heter to eat from pasakum. So the Gemara says, that's taka the case. Why? Because Avdimi came, he said, once Rebbe was outside of the city, he was in the field. Of pas, porni, that he brought from him bread that was baked in a porni. Porni is a large oven. And in times of the Gemara, most ovens were these very small ovens that have its opening from the top. Pas porni was an oven, a larger oven that has its opening from the side, like our ovens today. And ma'ifasa, it was baked a big amount of a saw in it. And Amar Rebbe said about this bread, Kama no pasu, how pleasant, how good is this bread? And ma'ro chachamim lo yisra. Why did chachamim ask this bread that we can't eat the bread from goyim? So the Gemara says, what's Rebbe asking this question? Why did Chachamim ask this? Why did Chachamim see that they asked this? We know the reason. Mishum chasnos. The reason is because you shouldn't come to intermarry. So Ella ma ro Chachamim lo yisra b'sada. His question was, but if that's the reason, so then it should only be a iser when you're in the city, in your house, and then you can be there amongst goyim and join them. But if you're out traveling, and it's over here, b'sada, why would the iser apply even in such a case as well? That was the question that Rebbe asked. This is what Rav Dimi said. So the people thought when they heard that Rebbe said this, that hit the Rebbe apas. That Rebbe, when he asked this question, Rebbe meant to say that this gzeira of Chazal went too far, and he came to be mat to this gzeira. But v'loi, it's not true. Rebbe loi hit it as a pas. Rebbe did not come to be mat to this gzeira on pas. He was asking this question, but he never was mat to the bread. Now Rav Yosef Yitem Rav Shmuel by Yehuda Omar. They reported and they said the story was different. Not like this was the story. Ella Omru, they said, Rebbe came to a certain place. And Rebbe saw that the students, they're learning Torah, and they don't have bread to eat. Omar Rebbe, so Rebbe says, En kampalter, is there no baker here that you can get bread? So the people thought that what Rebbe was saying was that Rebbe was saying you can't get any bread even from a Goyish baker. But that's not what Rebbe's intention was. His intention was that you can get bread from a baker, from a Yiddish baker. Rab Chelboy says, Palter, even according to those opinions that thought that there's a heter for the pas akum, where is there this heter? That's only in a situation where you can't get bread from a Yiddish bakery. So then there would be a heter to use from a Goyish bakery. But in a place where there is a Yiddish bakery, there is no heter to use pas akum. But Rabbi Yechanan says, even those that thought that the bread from a guy is mutter, that's only when you're out traveling in a place in the field, but in the city, over there, the heter would not apply, mishum chasnos, because of not to intermarry with goyim. Now, the Gemara brings an incident of an Ameira Evu, Havamanchis, Va'ochel Pas Abe Metzri. He was biting and snacking and eating from the pas sakim from a guy. And where was he? Abei Metzri. He was out in the field by a border in the field. So he wasn't inside the city. Amalu Rave, Vitaimer of Nachman by Yitzchak. What's what Rave or of Nachman Yitzchak said about Evu, Leute shtoi bahadi de Evu. Don't speak to Evu. Or the shtoi minei. Don't learn from him, from Evu. Why? Because the Ka'ach Lachman Darmai, because he's eating pasakum. And he ate it in a way that wasn't allowed, even though he was eating it out in the field. So here, as you see in the Gemara, there is a svara that there was a heter for pasakim, even though when you learn the simple pshat of the Gemara seems to be saying that there is no actual heter. But b'poil, the Rishonim say that you could see that already in this Mana Gemara, when they made this gzeira, or even before, the people did not accept this gzeira, and a lot of people were noig heter. And therefore, in Shulchan Aruch, it's brought Yesh Mekilin. Yesh Mekilin, that in a place where you can't get Pas Yisrael, that you can use Pas Akum, even though, it says Dafka when you can't get Pas Yisrael, Yesh Mekilin, like the Gemara here says, the Lo Yamaran only in a place where you can't get Pas Yisrael. And this Gzeira, why is there a heter to this? Because bread is a basic necessity. And one of the klolim about the Gzeiras of Chazal is that if it's a Gzeira she'ein tzibur yochel lamid ba, they made a Gzeira and the tzibur won't have what to eat, so then there could be a heter for this in a b'shas adchak. This is the source of the heter of Pas Akum in such a kind of case.
I recall when I was